Madam Chair, we're now live.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Due to the COVID-19 emergency and requirements for physical distancing, in-person attendance is not permitted at this meeting of the Community Affairs and Planning Committee. The meeting will be live streamed for viewing at www.ajax.ca/live, and electronic participation is permitted pursuant to Council's procedure bylaw. So I'm going to call this meeting to order. Are there any disclosure of pecuniary interest?
No.
No, being none. Can I have a mover to adopt the minutes for the regular meeting January 4th, 2021? Councillor Lee. Seconded by Councillor Bauer. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. And we have a presentation this evening. Mr. Clerk, I believe it's Mr. McCullough that's doing the presentation.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Sean McCullough. I'll be giving two presentations this evening. The first presentation is on the Central Ajax Intensification, Servicing, and Transportation Strategy, which we refer to as the CAST strategy. And tonight we'll be going over phase 1 and 2 of the project. So really quickly, for tonight's agenda, we'll just be giving a quick overview of the project and why we've undertaken this strategy, as well as the key findings from phases 1 and 2, and then finally where we're planning on going with phase 3 and the next steps of this project. So first off, I just want to give council kind of an understanding of some of the development interest that we've had in our study area, which I'll describe in a moment. So quickly, we've got some developments shown on the screen, some of which have been approved and you'd be very familiar with. Others are currently under review by the town in the site plan application stage. And a few others have taken steps to start looking at servicing capacity and undertaken pre-consultation applications. So in terms of the study objectives, the town wanted to take a look at infrastructure needs for the emerging development in and around our study area. So the objective of the study was to look at growth potential to 2051 for the study area, looking at both residential and non-residential growth. The growth potential will be explored and used to complete technical analysis to evaluate both the transportation and servicing systems. And when I refer to servicing, I'm going to be discussing sanitary servicing, stormwater system, as well as the water system capacity. So here we have our study area. So we have the Downtown Regional Center, which is a strategic growth area. We also have the Ajax GO Station mixed use area, which is another emerging strategic growth area in the town. And that will actually be the second item we're discussing this evening. Our study area includes a proposed expanded MTSA boundary, and we'll also be looking at the employment areas in between and how connectivity is important for those areas. So for our project, we've broken it up into 3 phases. So phase 1 looks at the existing servicing and transportation capacity, looking at the existing on-the-ground development, as well as the approved growth to 2031. So this report was completed in October 2020. And phase 2, we start to look at servicing and transportation capacity technical reports that considers pre-consultation, as well as other development applications currently being reviewed by the town. And this represents an ambitious growth scenario to 2031. And this was completed in February of 2021. And then next up, we'll complete phase 3. So this will be preparing a 2051 development opportunities report that identifies servicing and transportation system upgrades for envisioned growth to 2051. And we're targeting completion for that in the fall of this year. To help us on this project, the town has retained the services of WSB Consulting. They have experience in planning, transportation, as well as engineering, looking at servicing. So they had a good team of in-house staff that could help us with this project. We've also developed a project steering committee consisting of staff from both the town as well as the region, because the region is responsible for servicing in the town. And we also have regional roads that are through our study area. So in terms of phase one, two separate reports were completed. Phase one examined the existing conditions, as I mentioned, and it applied 10 projects. 9 of these projects are approved or under construction, and a 10th one is what we refer to as a theoretical. It's growth in our MTSA that was approved through the official plan, and we know that there's capacity there. So it's just a theoretical that there will be something in place by the 2031 timeline. So this phase adds about 2,500 units, 500 long-term care beds, as well as almost 13,500 square meters of non-residential gross floor area. So the servicing report, it confirmed the capacity for the existing and approved developments. And really, this shouldn't be any surprise as they are approved developments, but this really helps lay the groundwork for our later phases of this project. There were several minor stormwater constraints in the minor system. So that's the 5 and the 10-year storm. However, there were no constraints identified in the major storm system, which is the 100-year storm event. And so because there were no constraints in that major system, at this time, there's no improvements to the minor system needed. In terms of transportation report, so the report examined existing conditions and it identified two intersections that are already approaching capacity. So that was Westney Road and Bailey, as well as Westney Road and Farrell Road. So the report then applied a series of planned infrastructure improvements, such as the Hunt Street extension, as well as widenings to both Westney and Bailey Street to see what that would do to the system, and then applied our same 10 developments that we mentioned in the servicing report. So through this analysis, it was determined that there would be 5 intersections that would be approaching or experiencing some capacity constraints. So the consultants recommended optimizing signal timing for some of the intersections, signalizing the Bailey Street and Mackenzie Road intersection, as well as increasing signal length at various intersections. So where the road is being widened, increasing the signal length to 120 seconds to ensure that pedestrians have time to cross the road. Then we moved on to phase 2 of the project. So this builds on that phase 1 analysis and it applied an additional 9 developments. So these 9 developments represent an additional 3,900 dwelling units, as well as just over 3,000 square meters of non-residential gross floor area. So in the servicing report, it identified a constraint in one of the sewer segments, and I'll discuss that in a moment, and evaluated 4 alternative sanitary solutions that can deliver capacity to our downtown. Similar to phase 1, several constraints in the minor system were identified during the 5 and 10-year storms. However, again, no major constraints were identified in the major system. So because, again, there's no issues with the major system, there were no improvements recommended at this time. So here we have an image that shows some of the sanitary infrastructure. So on the screen, the yellow is an existing sewer leg, and that's sewer leg 1 in the ground. We then have in the orange is sewer leg 2, and this is the sewer leg that identified capacity constraints. And a lot of that results from Ajax Textiles, as a lot of the capacity from during short intervals are, there's a high volume of wastewater released from that facility for short intervals. And so there's a capacity constraint there. And then in the brown, we have an existing sewer leg 3. You can also see throughout the study area, there's all these minor sewer legs as well that provide some capacity, but these are the main ones that really target and deliver capacity for our downtown. 4 alternatives were evaluated. So at this time, a preferred alternative hasn't been identified as they all have their pros and cons, but certainly the Hunt Street alternative does emerge as one of the top contenders because it provides capacity for both transportation as well as servicing. And it makes sense that if you're installing the transportation infrastructure, that it's relative. I say it's relatively easy to install the sanitary as part of that construction project and complete all of the work at once. However, if there are delays in acquiring the land or advancing this project, there are several other options. So we have option 2A, which can be constructed along Bailey Street and would provide some capacity for the in the vicinity of Monarch and Bailey. It could also be connected through an option 2B to Ajax Textiles. There's just as you connect that, there's some other challenges with topography and things like that that have to be considered. There was another alternative three, which follows the Doughty route. So the downfall, the town owns all of the land that along this route. It's just you'd be opening up an existing road, so there'd be some additional cost associated with that if we were to go that route. And then alternative four is definitely the least preferred option, as it follows the existing alignment of the sewer leg, and it's definitely the longest alignment. Moving on with the transportation section, so the same developments were applied to the transportation system. And through that, 11 intersections were identified to experience some minor capacity constraints during peak times. So again, the consultant identified a series of improvements to the system that would help alleviate some of the congestion. So again, this looks at signal improvements and optimization, reconsidering a dual left turn at Westney Road and Farrell Street, adding protected left turn phases for some of the heavy left turn movements identified in the study, and increasing signal length again for some of the intersections, and then working with MTO to explore option of an additional turn lane off the eastbound 401 off ramp. So through this, there's still some intersections that are identified to have some capacity constraints. So in order to help with congestion with some of these other locations, active transportation really does start to become important for this strategic growth area where we're anticipating growth and looking at how we can move people. So some of the mitigation or this are the measures that were recommended by the consultant that should be in place by 2031 include the installation of multi-use paths along Bailey Street and Westney Road, installation of a cycle track along Hunt Street, the future Hunt Street, bike lanes on Harwood Avenue south of Bailey, as well as high frequency buses, both 10 and 20-minute intervals on Bailey and Westney. And so this is where we're working with Durham Region Transit as well to try and look at our options. There were also some policy improvements that we can look at improving future developments. So ensuring that there's sidewalk construction on both sides of the road throughout the entire study area, encouraging and secured bike storage and shower facilities through new development, as well as the installation of just benches throughout the study area. So next up, we will proceed to phase 3 of the project, and this is where we'll start to consult with residents, landowners, and other stakeholders. So we'll examine some potential growth scenario options and develop a preferred growth scenario that the consultants will then complete the same transportation and servicing analysis for the study area, looking at this preferred growth scenario, and then determine some of the improvements needed in the area. They'll also complete a 3D model or a digital 3D model to help visualize what that density could look like, and then create a development opportunities report. Finally, there'll also be itemized cost estimate for the infrastructure improvements, and this will assist the town in developing our future DC background studies, as well as environmental assessments and all of our other studies that we may be proceeding with. So one thing I just wanted to mention too is, so this project is intended to identify potential future capacity constraints. So we are mentioning some constraints in the transportation systems or the sanitary system. And that's why we're doing this project, because these are two of our strategic growth areas where we do anticipate seeing a lot of growth throughout this study area, and ensuring that we're prepared for the future and moving forward so that we can help development and make sure that this area creates a walkable neighborhood that is easily accessible by transit and the GO station, and really becomes kind of the key area in the town. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. On the line, I also have our consultant, Brett Sears, who can help answer some of the questions. And we also have, I believe, Steve Ruddy to help answer if there's any technical questions. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions.
Joanne, I don't know if you can see
Ready?
me, but I
Yep.
would like to ask a question. Sorry, thanks.
Go ahead.
I'm up, just like that.
You're up just like that. How easy was that? Gotcha.
Thank you. Through the chair, to Mr. McCullough, two questions that I'm sure other people will ask about. In regards to Hunt Street and the possible west expansion, and so that goes right through, and the pipe under the ground, it's water. So does that mean the region would pay for that if we had to have that expanded? Is that part of their projects?
So through the chair, that's correct. So that would be an expense from the region of Durham. So it is something that their works department has identified as a priority. I believe there was a report on servicing some of the employment areas, and this was captured in
Okay.
that and identified as a priority pending the results of this study.
That's good to hear, because obviously we need that done before we can put in the street. And my second question is just very quickly through the chair again to Mr. McCullough. Dowdy Road to Monarch, it has that, if you look at the map, or I drive there, for some reason I end up on that corner quite often. Was there any talk of smoothing that out? Is that in the report? Could you just speak to that? My question being, would it go straight through at some point? Or you talked about signalizing it, right? Do you know what I'm talking about? If you see the map.
Yeah, so through the chair, and actually I was hoping Mr. Grieve would be on this call, but through the EA that completed through that section, it looked at a number of options. And Brett Sears, if you can jump in if needed, but there was a series of options. Some were looking at straightening it out. However, I believe the preferred option was a combination of signals and straightening some of the alignments out, just because of the odd alignment. I'd have to double check on that. I don't have the information in front of me at the moment, but there was definitely because there is requirements for acquiring some land, as well as there's the relatively new emergency facility at the corner there.
Absolutely, I can see that. Okay, well, maybe I'll follow up with Mr. Grieve on that, or if you can, but I would like some explanation on it. I'd really like to see that happen eventually. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mayor Collier?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mr. McCullough, and thank you for the presentation. Just to the sewer capacity, the four options that you've shown, is there any one solution that will satisfy all of the development in the downtown core till 2051, or we're going to have to use a combination of those four?
So through the chair to Mayor Collier, so when we look at the current development, one of those solutions could solve the current ambitious growth scenario. It could contribute to that. However, when we're going to be moving to our next phase, we'll have to start looking at other options, whether we can get one pipe big enough that can accommodate a number of those areas, or whether it is going to be a combination of pipes in various locations. That's still to be determined in the phase 3, but something we're certainly going to be looking at.
Okay, well, that's I guess my question. If we've been talking about the Hunt Street extension all the way through as being sort of the key to unlocking our downtown, but you say about a 600 millimeter pipe. What I'm asking is, I don't want to do a 600 millimeter pipe and then find out in 2035 that all of a sudden we're constrained again and we've got to look at this again. I'd maybe rather do an 800 millimeter pipe, for example, if that's a thing in the first place. Is that something that's going to be looked at and analyzed through phase 3?
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, that's correct. We're going to be looking at that, and that's why we're holding off, kind of recommending that preferred solution. So we're making sure that we're putting the right pipe in the ground.
Okay. Ultimately, I want to, like any work we do, I want to make sure it's the work we need to do to get us to 2051. So we're not constrained. Just going to the phase 1, it says phase 1 was complete. And just so I understand correctly, let me just go to the report. It was on page 10, where it talks about the service and technical report. I'm not looking at the transportation, but a spreadsheet model is developed. The analysis confirmed that the existing infrastructure is adequate to accommodate the existing and 10 approved and assumed developments for 2031. So I assume that 10 approved is that the ones that we pre-consulted and we've already got in the works right now for the downtown?
So through the chair to Mayor Collier, no. So those are the existing developments that we have that have been approved that are either under construction or have been completed. So it's such as Medallion, the long-term care facilities at the hospital and Ballycliffe, Stafford Homes at Hunt Street and Monarch. So these are developments that we're anticipating coming online that have been reviewed by the region, and it's been determined that there's capacity in the ground to allow those to go forward. And
Okay.
then the ones in pre-con are the ones that we've looked at in phase 2.
All right, that's where I'm going on to page 12 with the phase 2, where it talks about, just let me get down here, under the ambitious growth, which I do think, would you agree that given the applications we have right now, we would absolutely be in the ambitious growth?
So through the chair to Mayor Collier, yes. So this represents, we call it ambitious growth, but it's more growth than was originally anticipated in the town's current official plan. So that's why we're just calling it ambitious growth, but we certainly think that it is achievable by 2031 if the infrastructure is in place.
Right, okay. I'm just looking here, it's talking about the analysis for the sewer legs and I mean, how long is it going to take to do phase 3?
So through the chair to Mayor Collier, we're hoping to have phase 3 completed by the fall of this year. So we'll work on over the next couple months developing the preferred growth scenario. We can look at consultation either towards over the summer or into early fall, and then completing the analysis.
Okay, because what I'm concerned about is more instances of the Stafford homes where we had to approve 122 medium density townhouses in our downtown because we didn't have enough sewer capacity for the high density that should have gone on that site. And if this takes a year, and then if it takes however long for the region to allocate more resources to help us solve our capacity, I'm concerned about how many more applications that we're already having gone through pre-consult now that we might have to approve that are medium density in our downtown. Is there any way we can accelerate the timeframes on this?
Through the chair, I think that the work that's been completed to date can definitely help advance some of those early discussions and start moving towards, if we are looking at Hunt Street, to start looking at construction and ultimate completion of that. And then hopefully by the time we get to a point where we've started to look at detailed design and everything, we've completed or we're far enough in phase 3 that we can start determining what size pipe is needed. If that's the preferred option, and start moving towards that direction and try to, I guess, layer the multiple projects with one another.
Okay. Last year we had, and maybe Councillor Lee can speak further to this as he's on planning, but or actually might be Crawford on works, but we had a report come forward that showed a number of projects, and Hunt Street was one of the projects at the region. And there was funds allocated, I think it was 8 million or something, 6 or 8 million. And I tried to have a motion to get it moved forward and it wasn't successful. So I think it's in the 2021 year. Are you familiar with that?
So
Being, I don't have all the details right in front of me.
yeah. So through the chair to Mayor Collier, yes, I think you're correct. I believe it was five, almost $6 million. So it was identified as a priority. I believe in the same report they moved forward with some projects in the north end of Durham, and then this was kind of the next tier of priority. And so they wanted to ensure that the case was moving along. And we've been working very closely with regional staff in their servicing section to make sure that everything aligns. And they've been the ones really helping with the project to make sure that it's going to, in the end, we're going to have something and providing them with the direction that they need as well.
Okay. One of the things I've been really pushing on finance is trying to accelerate some of these pre-servicing, a number of other things across the region. And now we seem to be getting caught up in that regard. I want to make sure that when that funding does become available this year, we're ready to be moving on that as quickly as possible. Just to change gears, as I was saying, I don't want any applications to come through that are going to be detrimental to our long-term vision, meaning, you know, medium density in the downtown. Would it be smart, or would it be proper to look at an interim control bylaw in the midterm until we figure out phase 3 and which of these is the right thing to go forward, to make sure that no applications go through and we're forced to allow before we get that capacity?
So through the chair to Mayor Collier, there may be I'm hesitant to recommend the application of an interim control bylaw at this time. Um, we can keep an eye out for if there are projects that we think could really deviate from our vision. Um, However, I don't, this time I don't think it's really needed. The servicing is already a capacity issue, and a lot of these developments that have been coming forward. So if your concern is looking at lower density, I know Stafford, um, your concern something similar to Stafford, but the reason they were assigned capacity was because when the Siemens building was previously removed, there was capacity already assigned to that. So they were able to pick up some of the capacity constraints. Um, I'm not, I think we would see something coming. I don't think we'll be surprised if there is a development that deviates from our ultimate vision for the area, and we could respond if needed. But at this time, I don't think it's needed. And even the interim control bylaw, it only gives you 1 year. So if there were other planning processes or something that needed to follow up afterwards, you know, passing one preemptively and looking while we're completing the case, the timelines may not align. So right now, I don't think it's needed, but it's certainly something that we consider if something were to come up.
Okay, keep in your back pocket. I wasn't aware of the 1 year. I'd forgotten about that.
It's 1 year with a one potential for a 1 year extension.
Okay, and just finally, the I envision a downtown master plan coming forward, something that sort of lays out the whole project as a whole of what we see. Is that going to be part of phase 3, or is that something that we can look at after phase 3 is complete?
So there's a couple of things. So through the chair to Mayor Collier. So as part of this project, WSP is responsible to prepare the digital 3D model. So that will kind of lay out what we see as ideal densities and kind of looking at that preferred solution, helping visualize that. And then once the town gets to our next official plan review, or same with the GO station area, certainly with the GO station, we'll be likely looking at a secondary plan to look at, okay, what are the policies to really ensure that that area develops as we envision. And then with the downtown, we can also look at our official plan policies to make adjustments where needed.
Okay. I've just seen that used very well in some other municipalities, like our neighbor in Pickering, for instance, with their downtown, and getting that sort of buy-in. Once you have something that people can see and start working towards, it really helps having that vision. So I'm hoping that's something we can look at going forward. Those are my questions. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. McCullough.
You're on mute, Chair.
Are there any
Sorry.
further questions on this report? Regional Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mr. McCullough. I noticed in a couple of areas you were talking about, excuse me, Bailey Street and HOV lanes. Why on earth would we need that on Bailey?
So through the chair to Councillor Crawford. So HOV lanes are really looking at moving for transit vehicles and things like that, and ensuring that those transit vehicles will be making it to the station. So that's really what they're intended to do.
So not for cars, for buses.
So they do, and if Brett's on the line too, but typically they would allow for a mix of both transit vehicles as well as vehicles carrying more than, depending on how it's structured, 2 or 3 people, just to make sure that they are also being used efficiently. So it's capturing as many people as possible.
So unlike the bus lanes on Highway 2.
That's correct.
Almost the opposite. Okay. the other question I had was through the works and Vision Zero, I noticed from the budget that Bailey and Westney is looking to be somewhat widened by adding that right-hand turn lane for Durham Live. Do you envision that when they decide to do that, that they also look at the other upgrades that you're looking at to only have one big disruption as opposed to, having that disruption and then kind of breaking up the intersection again to do the dedicated, wait a minute, I think it was Farrell, you were looking at the 2 left-hand turn lanes, right? Not at Bailey and Westney?
That's correct.
Okay. And has there ever been given any thought to 2 left-hand turn lanes from Westney onto Bailey? There's that one lane goes quite long when it goes to left-hand turn lanes, and I'm wondering if perhaps that becomes a dual left-hand turn lane, maybe even protected, so that it's only when there's an arrow that they're turning. It's just my thought. I hate that. I love and hate road construction, and I think if we're gonna do it, we do it all at once as opposed to doing it in piecemeal, because that never wins anybody over. So anyway, that's just my comments. Thank you.
Councillor Bauer, did you have your hand up?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I did. Thank you, Mr. McCullough, for the presentation. I just had a couple questions. Many of mine were already asked. What again is area specific policy 6.19? So it's part of the map on page 7.
So through the chair to Councillor Bauer, so that's an existing special policy area in our official plan, and it just recognizes the potential for future residential uses in both the near the GO station as well as the downtown, and just recommends that future employment uses start to look at mitigation measures and reducing impacts on those future residential uses. So it's been something that's been our official plan for a number of years, knowing that residential growth was going to start happening around and starting to plan for it.
Okay, thank you. The other question that I had was, I think it was in the report. So after phase 1 and phase 2, it says a total of 6,355 dwelling units, 512 long-term care beds, 16,650 square of non-residential floor area, and approximately 12,200 residents. So my question, I guess, is about the residents, and as part of this evaluation through, I guess, an accessibility lens or just a review of the projection of who those residents would be. And the reason I ask that is there's mentioned several times about widening the lanes and increasing the traffic light times. So I just wonder if that's something that's reviewed, looking at perhaps instead of 120 seconds, do we need to actually even increase it based on who might be crossing those roads?
So through the chair to Councillor Bauer. So I think that's a good comment. Mr. Sears, are you able to answer that if you've looked at that or considered that? I know 120 sounds to be, or in our discussions is recommended for this, but also one of the other recommendations was looking at the addition of benches throughout the area, which seems like a simple solution or simple idea, but definitely can help in those situations as well to provide rest areas for certain individuals. But Mr. Sears, did you have any other additional comments on that?
Yes, thank you, Sean. Through the chair to the councillor, Brett Sears from WSP, working with Sean and the rest of your great team at the town on this project. When we're looking at crossing time, there used to be a best practice of 1.2 meters per second. But now we're trying to take a more conservative approach and actually say that people only walk 1 meter per second, and that is designed in order to accommodate all people, regardless of their age, to try to make sure that we have enough time. And so some of these recommendations are based on the fact that if we widen the road, there's a further distance to cross and it will take longer. At the same time, there is also a rule of thumb that we don't go beyond 120 seconds, because then that is just adding to delay for everybody. In terms of the people waiting to cross, now are waiting more than 2 minutes to get their crossing time. And the buses are waiting longer, and the vehicles are also waiting longer. So I think our analysis is showing this all of life type of a situation where we're trying to provide more time for people to walk, regardless their age, to cross the street. At the same time, trying to find the balance so that we don't have people waiting an inordinate amount of time. And so that's why this 120 seconds is typically seen as a best practice, to typically not go beyond that for a signal phase.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate the answer. And so the timeline for these widenings are, we're hoping or planning for 2031, like within the next 10 years.
So through the chair to Councillor Bauer, so that's the recommendation from the report. It would be then making sure that the region is looking at these widenings in their capital work plans. And that's what we're hoping to use this study to help support our case as we try to look for those improvements through the town.
That's great. It's ambitious, and I think that would be fantastic. So thank you very much. That's all my questions.
Are there any other questions? Okay, then I'll read the recommendation for this report. That the report entitled Central Ajax Intensification Servicing and Transportation Strategy Phases 1 and 2 and associated attachments be received for information, and that staff be authorized to consult with residents, landowners, and other key stakeholders to develop a preferred growth scenario for phase 3 of the strategy that will be used to determine transportation and servicing requirements to accommodate growth to 2051. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. That's carried.
Madam Chair, I think you may be missing a move seconder.
I'll move it.
I'm sorry. You're right.
Second.
I missed it. So Mayor Collier and Councillor Bauer, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
So it's back to Mr. McCullough again with 5.2 on the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Presentation.
Okay. All right, so for my second presentation and final of this evening's meeting, this is just a quick update, and it was staff's comments in relation to the major transit station areas policy direction report that was released by the region. So these are a relatively short report, but just some staff's comments on this item. So first up, just a quick reminder, major transit station areas, or MTSAs as we call them, are generally located within 500 and 800 meters surrounding major transit station or a higher order transit station. And in Ajax, that's the Ajax GO station. So the growth plan requires upper tier municipalities to delineate MTSAs in their official plans. And in this case, in the case of stations along the GO transit line, plan for a minimum of 150 people and jobs per hectare. So these stations are also required to be transit supportive and multimodal, plan for a mix of uses, including affordable housing, provide alternative development standards, including reduced parking standards, and can prohibit uses that may impact the achievement of some of these objectives. So this is, the region had previously released a discussion paper on growth management, which included some of the major transit station areas. This is the next step. They've released a document that outlines some of their proposed policies. And then at the end, I'll discuss where we go for next. So in Durham, just as a quick reminder, we have 4 existing GO stations that they're reviewing for at major transit station areas. So that's downtown Pickering, Ajax GO station, Whitby GO station, as well as the Oshawa GO station. And then there are 4 stations along the committed GO line out to Bowmanville. And so that includes a station at Thornton's Corners, a station at Central Oshawa, a station in Curtis, and 1 in Bowmanville. So in terms of the policy direction report, This paper provides highlight a list of proposed permitted uses, including a variety of high-density residential and mixed-use buildings, institutional uses such as post-secondary and places of worship, commercial uses such as restaurants, personal and professional services, as well as small-scale retail and daycares, cultural, arts, and entertainment uses, public uses such as parks, recreational and community facilities, trails, and conservation uses. It also is recommending to prohibit auto-oriented and land-intensive uses such as service stations, car washes, drive-through establishments, warehousing, and public storage. The report also encourages transit-oriented design, which promotes urban design, pedestrian and public spaces, active transportation and transit usage. And to achieve this, they're looking at proposed policy directions that encourage, promote placemaking, encourage underground structured parking, encouraging high-quality compact street design with active uses like patios, for example. And another proposed policy would also permit development over the rail corridor if there was desired, and lays out some compatibility studies and policies that would be considered. So in the terms of Ajax's proposed major transit station area, so we touched on it in the last presentation, but here we have the proposed delineated boundaries of that MTSA. So it recognizes barriers such as Highway 401 and the Duffins Creek. It avoids stable neighborhoods to the north that have limited redevelopment potential at this time anyway. Protection of employment area to allow employers to operate without encroaching sensitive land uses, and then creates a new gateway node at the Bailey and Westney Road intersection. That's why we've captured lands on both sides. So most of our comments, staff generally support the majority of the policies that are outlined in the MTSA, and these largely reflect a lot of the policies the town already have in our current official plan in the Ajax GO station. We were one of the first to actually do something similar to that, so a lot of the policies actually reflect some of our standards anyway. So staff support the boundaries that have been proposed and have been working with regional staff to get to this point. And we also definitely support the policy recommending that a minimum number of jobs be maintained in these MTSAs, as we know that's important moving forward. So staff have also just made some minor comments that are outlined in the staff report to help improve the policy framework for MTSAs. So this includes expanding language to ensure that other forms of high density housing would be permitted, clarifying some of the permitted uses such as commercial fitness centers, improving language related to height to allow more local decision making, and ensuring that policy that promote permeable road networks also apply to the regional roads, because we know that the regional roads fall under their jurisdiction, and we'd like just to make sure that there's a lot of opportunities for pedestrian movement across those. The discussion paper also touches on a couple of other topics, some of which won't be reviewed through this regional official plan amendment. But first, the paper discusses the possibility of a regional community improvement plan. So the report identifies that the region CIP could be used to offer incentives to help with items such as affordable housing, high density mixed use development, sustainability, and energy efficiency. So I know the region has brought on a consultant and they're starting to look at this outside of the MCR process. So, but they're just tying this to as a possibility. And so staff we support the region looking at the CIP, and we're definitely supportive to help them and work with them looking at some of the programs that they propose to offer. Second, the paper discusses inclusionary zoning, which is permitted in MTSAs to require development to achieve a minimum number of affordable housing units. To implement this, the region, normally there's an assessment report that a municipality is required to complete. So the region has actually just thrown it out as an idea that they would actually complete the assessment report on behalf of the municipalities and help with the policy implementation. So staff definitely think that's a good use of resources and can benefit the town. So we're definitely supportive of that approach. So with the next steps, we would be submitting just our minor comments to the region, and then the region is going to be drafting a regional official plan amendment. So they're actually planning to bring this forward before the municipal comprehensive review process is completed. This is something that the province opened up as an option. So the region is planning on bringing that ROPA forward. It's anticipated that the statutory public meeting will be happening sometime before the summer this year, possibly. So it'll be important to keep an eye out on that. And once the ROPA is released, staff will review it again just to ensure that all the policies that are outlined in that reflect kind of the comments or the policies that were outlined in the discussion paper, and see where some of our comments have aligned in that. So that'll be something to look forward to, and we definitely will keep council informed on that. And with that, that's the end of my presentation this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. McCullough. Are there any questions? Mayor Collier.
Just one very quick, Mr. McCullough, very thorough, thank you. One thing that caught my attention though, places of worship being an allowed use, I found that a bit odd since we actually have a bylaw not allowing places of worship in employment zones. Is that something that's allowed through the regional official plan? Or how is that allowed as a use?
So through the chair to Mayor Collier. So currently you're correct. They are prohibited in employment areas. However, once the region applies the major transit station area designation, that will become a new designation. So it will no longer be an employment designation. It'll become a mixed use. And places of worship are permitted in mixed use designations. Starting to see them pop up in some mixed use buildings. It's not very common yet, but it's definitely something that's starting to happen. But currently, so they would be, they're proposed to be permitted at this time.
Do we have any feedback in that? Because the reason why we have a ban is because we are losing so much employment land to places of worship. And I have nothing against places of worship. We have about 34, 35 of them in Ajax, but they only employ one person and don't pay taxes. So, I mean, that to me kind of goes against what we've done. We had to bring this in for a reason. And now by expanding this zone and just looking at the zone very quickly, I already see, I think, 4 existing places of worship in that current boundary. How is that going to help if, you know, I envision tall buildings, high density mixed use. I don't mind if any of the individual offices perhaps have that type of use, but having a standalone church or something like that, I don't think would be fitting in for instance, the GO train terminal or the GO station area.
So
Do we have any input? Because we already have made a statement and now this is going to change it.
Yep. So through the chair to Mayor Collier. So as I mentioned, this would no longer be an employment area. It would be a mixed use area.
Right.
So they are permitted in mixed use areas. Through our official plan review, though, we can certainly include policy that would prohibit standalone places of worship, or at least we can look at that as an option to move forward to ensure that there are other employment uses and high density residential occurring throughout the area.
Yeah, like a standalone obviously wouldn't have underground parking, it'd be single story, it would just take up a lot of property, but not have the benefits that the whole point of having this expansion and having these additional uses. As far as used in a commercial plaza or something within the whole area, okay, that's fine. But standalones, I think, would be a problem. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. McCullough. So are you able to speak a little bit more about the region's consideration of a regional community improvement plan? What does that look like to Ajax?
So through the chair to Councillor Bauer. So at this time, it's very early. They only brought consultants on earlier this year, I believe, or late last year. So we're anticipating being consulted on with that project in the coming months, at which time we'll have more details. The items that I mentioned in the presentation are the only items that they've identified at this time that they could potentially be looking at. But there's been no decision at this time that I'm aware of on what types of development or programs that they may offer through that community improvement plan. But it's something that they're looking at region wide. So they would target specific types of projects that are of regional importance, and then try to bring that forward and help with programs that way.
And do you think that would be replacing the two CIPs that are currently suspended here? Like, is
So
that how that would work?
So through the chair, so this would be their own program, and they would be financial incentives offered by the region. But I think we as the town would need to look at our CIPs, which we're doing or we will be completing, and just making sure that if we do move forward or if we do replace those CIPs, that we're not duplicating some of the programs or duplicating efforts. That we would definitely have to look at that if we were to move forward with the CIPs.
Thank you very much. That's it, Chair.
Anything further? I just had a couple of questions, and I know it's a little early in the process, but because we're intensifying this area in the downtown area, and we're also mixing it with, commercial and prestige employment, different types of things, we know now that, it's really important to plan green space in all of these developments so that there are connections with businesses and residences. I think with COVID, we all have a new appreciation for what that provides us with respect to overall health, but it also gets cars off the road when people are cycling or walking. And this is a real opportunity to really enhance green spaces and connecting those green spaces throughout the downtown and in the GO area. So moving forward, is that something we're going to consider more of, and maybe, giving a little bit more of that green space to these developments?
So through the chair to Councillor Dyes. So actually going back to the CAST project, so a component of that project is to start looking at potential locations for parkland throughout the study area, because it also has an impact on density and looking for ideal locations and how those are connected. So that's kind of the first step. And then the next step is starting to look at, as Mayor Collier brought up earlier, and looking at secondary plans and projects like that, really starting to get into the details in the major transit station areas, certainly, and looking at where those locations for the parkland are located, how they're achieved, how the connections to them are made, and then starting to look at the programming as well through Parks and Culture Master Plan. So that's where all of these plans start to converge and start to look at the ultimate scenario for parkland or green space for these areas.
So when you talk about parkland, we will consider leash-free dog areas and community gardens, things that bring community together.
Through the chair, Councillor Dye. So currently our official plan does permit or promote community gardens and those types of things. But that's something that is being looked at through the culture and rec master plan. So looking at the need for those different facilities. So that's the plan that really starts to look at the programming of the space. So we identify the ideal locations, and then we rely on that plan to start looking at the programming.
So in this major transit area is also the trail that goes along the Duffins Creek, which is we have a bit of a problem now because we have a break in that trail, but it was a direct link to the GO station for people living in the south and for anybody who was getting off the bus and could walk that little bit further, whatever. It's a really important link. It's the only one in the east side that connects north to south as well. So that to me is a real priority, and we need to address that and see if we can continue or get rid of that broken up piece of that trail so we can link it back together. So is that going to be a priority? Because to me that takes, a lot of cars off the road. And it also helps with any, there may be, like I say, some people getting off the bus that don't necessarily have to make the connection, can just take their bike and go.
Yep. So through the chair to Councillor Dice, so that's definitely something we can look at. I believe that's identified in the transportation master plan, and we'd have to speak to transportation about making that connection. And then also we can look at that through the case, I guess, to make sure that those connections are made through the study area, and they look at the external connections to make sure that we're bringing as many people and ensuring that the multimodal transportation options are available to the Ajax residents to get to and from the GO station, which I agree is certainly a priority.
Because we are building some developments down south of that, so it would be critical. But thank you. Those are all my questions. Is there anything further? Okay, so the motion, I'll read the motion that the report entitled Envision Durham Municipal Comprehensive Review, Town of Ajax Comments on the Major Transit Station Areas Policy Directions Report be endorsed and sent to the Region of Durham Planning and Economic Development Department. Can I have a mover? Rob Tyler Moran, and a seconder, Councillor Lee. All in favor? Any opposed? It's carried. Thank you. So I need someone to move an adjournment.
We adjourn.
Councillor Khan, seconded by Mayor Collier. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Mr. McCullough, for your presentations.
Joanne, do you
Thanks,
have
everyone. Good night.
for a call after this?